Welcome to Crimepedia. I am your host this week. My name is Morgan. I hope you are having a wonderful day. And with me, as always, is my true crime BFF. She is the star of the show. Her name is Cherry. Hello, Cherry.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this very wet English day. We have just had a
little
very
bit
good
of rain today.
Just a little bit. We have just had a very good Patreon episode in which you can hear us chatting about the latest updates in the true crime world and what's been going on over in America in the last 2 weeks, and the lack of stuff happening in England. So if you want to catch up with that, you can do that. Just go over to patreon.com and find us under Crimepedia, and you can join us and be part of our gang.
Well, depending on what's happening, I guess could be a good or a bad thing that nothing is happening there, you know?
That's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah. No, so it's fun. Yeah. So if you want to check that out and you want to listen to all of our other Crimepedia extra episodes, you can do so by joining our Patreon. All you need to do is go to patreon.com/Crimepedia. And for less than $2 a month, you can get all of that and more.
You can. You can also do the same for Twisted Britain. They always take the mickey out of us for our slogan of Morgan telling you how you can join Patreon. So if you want to, I believe they've got a Patreon too. And if you want to join theirs, go over and join theirs as well. And I trust me,
Yes.
you will not be disappointed because those boys are hilarious. So if you ever want to hear to an utter load of nonsense, but actually very factual nonsense, you need to go over and check their podcast out. We absolutely love them. Ali and Bob are brilliant, very good friends of ours with a very, very good podcast. So that's one highly recommended from us this week.
Yeah, and I should be joining them here shortly, soon.
Excellent. You're going to be on the show.
I'm going to be on the show, and I have a story to tell them. So it's going to be very
it's a good one. It's a very good
one. Yeah.
Yeah. If you like your history and your true crime history, then you should definitely listen to Ali and Bob's Twisted Britain when Morgan goes on as a guest. It'll be a good episode. I'll be listening.
Yeah, it'll be really good. So how about we get into this week's case? Or cases, really. So this is something that we haven't done. We were just talking about this. So we are coming up to 4 years or 3 years? I don't even know.
3 years. I think it's 3 years.
We've been 3 years.
3 years.
So
in August.
In August. So in the 3 years that we've been doing this, we have never once talked about a serial killer.
No, we've never done a serial killer's case.
Yeah, we've talked about cases where the victims could possibly have been a victim of serial killer.
Yeah.
But we've actually never talked about a serial killer case. Well, that is changing today because we are going to be discussing the New Bedford highway killer. From April to September 1988, New Bedford, Massachusetts, witnessed the inexplicable vanishing of 11 women. As the months passed, the grim discovery of the remains of 9 of these women began to unfold. Regrettably, the remaining 2 missing women have yet to be located and are presumed deceased. It was only when law enforcement authorities started recognizing striking parallels among the victims that they concluded the disappearances and the tragic deaths were the acts of a serial killer. This is Crimepedia, and this is the New Bedford Highway Killer. All right, Cherry. In May 1988, Deborah Medeiros, aged 30, left her mother Olivia's residence in Fall Rivers, Massachusetts, to see her boyfriend, who was living on Liberty Street in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Deborah, who was a habitual drug user, often had stretches of time where she didn't communicate with her mother. Now, after a few days, Deborah's boyfriend reached out to Olivia, informing her that they had got into a heated argument on the night of May 27th and that he had not seen her since. He presumed that Deborah might have returned to Olivia's home, but it had been several days since she left, and Olivia hadn't run into her daughter. Olivia then would quickly file a missing persons report.
Yeah.
On July 3rd, 1988, a female motorist had stopped on Route 140 northbound, just north of Freetown, Massachusetts, to walk her dog, when she stumbled over human remains. The partially nude body of a woman with a bra wrapped around her neck was located in brush approximately 30 feet off the road. To investigators on the scene, it did not appear as though it had been a recent death.
Oh.
The body was nearly unrecognizable. The skin appeared to be leather-like, as though the body had been there for months. Now, state
Like
police would take
preserved
photographs.
almost.
Yes, yeah.
So, like, if it's like leather-like, then that would suggest that the body has been there and dried. Like,
yes,
yeah, of moisture would be not have a lot of moisture in it. So that's interesting.
you rarely hear that.
No.
Bodies being leather-like.
That's very interesting.
Like you would get that in a situation where someone has been went through the embalming process, right?
Yeah, or left somewhere where there's a heat that would dry the body out slowly.
Yeah, and this wouldn't be one of those locations because this would be, this is in Massachusetts. Yeah, there's gonna be heat, but I mean, it's not like a desert dry heat. I mean, you're gonna have moisture and air. It's gonna be very humid.
Yeah.
So for it to dry out to that point is very peculiar. Very strange to me.
Very strange. I get it.
Very strange to me. Yes.
Yeah, that is very strange. No, you're right. That is very strange.
Now, state police would take photographs of the body and take fingerprints before having the medical examiner remove it. An autopsy would determine that the unidentified woman had been a victim of homicide and died from strangulation. The victim was white with brown hair and approximately 5 feet 2 inches tall. The woman had been treated for a broken jaw, which was still wired. Now, based on decomposition and the skin condition, the medical examiner believed that the body had been in the location since before winter, most likely dumped sometime between September and October 1987.
Right, okay.
Now, this was crazy to me. At the time, there was a list of 1,724 missing women in Massachusetts who matched the description and death time frame. 1,724 women on that could have fit this person's description.
1,000, did you say?
1,724.
So it's almost 2,000 women that fit that description. That's scary.
This is going to be women that were over the course of numerous years. So basically, any woman that was missing, that hadn't been found dead, that would have been around the same height, that would have had the same hair color. Yeah, that's a lot of women.
That is a lot.
When I read that, I was like, that can't be right. But
no,
1,724.
Wow.
Now, obviously, police at that time were unable to find a match, and this became a Jane Doe. Okay. Now, on July 30th, 1988, this is just over 3 weeks later, two motorcyclists would report finding the body of a woman on westbound Interstate 195 between Hicksville Road overpass and the Reed Road exit. Now, this was less than 13 miles from where the body was found on Route 140 on July 3rd was found. Real quick, let me go back real quick. So the first body was, this is just absolute coincidence.
Right.
Body was found on Route 140, which may or may not sound familiar to you. It should, because Route 40 was the route that Teresa Corley was last seen and
Oh,
when she disappeared and was later found dead. So same stretch of road. I mean, miles apart. I mean, I don't know how many miles. I mean, maybe 20 miles difference. But
yeah.
Route 140 is the same place. Okay.
Yep.
Now this second body was found on Interstate 195. Like I said, it was less than 13 miles south of where the body was found on July 3rd.
Yeah.
Now this body was discovered 15 feet down a narrow, worn path. Okay. Investigators would take note of the path, thinking that it looked like a narrow cut through trail that a person would take in order to avoid a longer walk.
Yeah.
Now, like the first body, the features on this body were once again unrecognizable. The body had been weathered and had little more than a skeleton left.
Oh, wow.
It was reported that there was no smell or no flies present.
Yeah, so it's gone past that, hasn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's already
So,
gone past that that kind of stage.
yeah. So seems once again that this had been out for quite some time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the medical examiner would state that this woman had most likely died in the spring before the weather began to warm. Nancy Pava, age 36, was a mother of two, and she struggled with drug addiction. In the early hours of July 7th, 1988, following a fight with her boyfriend, Frankie Pina, Nancy was last seen leaving Whispers Pub in New Bedford. According to Frankie, after Nancy's departure, she wandered along County Street in search of money to settle a fine for passing fraudulent checks.
Oh.
A friend later claimed to have witnessed Nancy entering a parked truck near a street corner that night. 2 days would pass without Nancy returning home, prompting Frankie to visit the New Bedford police station and filing a missing persons report. Now, Frankie had a known history of involvement with drugs, robberies, and street schemes. Police had also been called numerous times to the apartment that Frankie and Nancy shared on Morgan Street due to instances of Frankie physically assaulting Nancy.
Oh.
Now, given Frankie's notoriety in the area, New Bedford police would take his concern for Nancy very seriously. Now, in learning about Nancy's disappearance, it unsettled Detective John Dextrado of the New Bedford police.
Uh-huh.
Now he knew who Frankie was and knew who Nancy was, well aware of what they were and what they did.
Right, so they were known in the local area then, I guess, were they?
Oh, yes,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah.
so both of them had been picked up on numerous occasions, and
Oh,
so everyone
okay.
within the police department knew who they were.
Right, okay.
Now he had last seen Frankie in April 1988, where Frankie had been in the company of another woman who had gone missing. Rochelle Clifford Dopriella, age 26, had been living with Nancy and Frankie just before she went missing on April 27th, 1988. Now, like we said, the last person to see her before she vanished was Frankie Pina. At the time, Rochelle held crucial testimony in two ongoing cases that Detective Dexterdo had been working on,
Uh-huh.
one involving a rape and the other one involving an assault. With Frankie now reporting Nancy's disappearance, Detective Dexterdo's suspicions immediately fell on Frankie. Despite not typically handling missing persons cases, Dexterdo assured Frankie that he would personally investigate Nancy's disappearance. However, his true motive lay in investigating Frankie himself. So you have Frankie Pina, who is reporting his long-term girlfriend missing. And you have Frankie Pina, who was living with Rochelle Dopierla, who was last seen with her, who went missing in April. So now you have a man who is close to two missing women. All right.
Yeah.
Now, on the evening of July 15th, 1988, Donald Santos drove his wife, Mary Rose, to downtown New Bedford and dropped her off at a tavern called the Quarter Deck Lounge. Now, Mary Rose was well known to Nancy and Frankie, as they all frequented the same taverns. Like Nancy, Mary Rose suffered from drug addiction.
Ah.
When Mary Rose failed to return home, Donald would report her missing to the New Bedford police. Investigators would determine that Mary Rose had left a quarterdeck lounge at approximately 1 a.m. and proceeded to visit a friend living nearby. After doing some cocaine, Mary Rose would tell her friend that she was going to work, as in she was going to see if she can
Sex work.
find some. She was going to do sex work. She was going to look for some
Okay.
customers.
Yeah, okay.
Now, Mary Rose would then begin making her way towards Weld Square, only to vanish without a trace. At 11:30 p.m. on August 11th, 1988, 25-year-old Sandy Botello would tell her boyfriend, Craig Andrade, that she was going to a friend's house a few doors down to get some bread. Sandy had been dropped off by a John at their Malden Street apartment in New Bedford just an hour earlier. Now, Craig and Sandy shared an addiction to cocaine, but a few months prior, their addiction had gotten so out of control that Craig decided to split from Sandy, and he would admit himself into a treatment program. But Sandy never stopped. It's believed that she would inject about a gram of cocaine a day and would work as a prostitute to make money to pay for it. She would frequently.
How much would that cost you? Do you know?
Oh,
How much
I have
would a
no
gram
idea.
of cocaine cost?
No idea. No, I'm sure someone out there knows.
I guess obviously
but-
it's gonna. I guess obviously it's going to. It's going to depend on where you're getting it from, but I wonder.
Yeah, where you're getting and when. Like was it that expensive in 1988? I mean, it very well could have been.
Let's have a look. Hang on.
All right.
It says the figures are very rough. In heroin and cocaine prices in Europe and USA. Oh, that's 2007, 2017. Cocaine prices, unweighted average. I was just looking to see. Oh, here we go. Price and purity of illicit drugs, 1981 to 2017.
Okay.
It's not actually telling you how much. I mean, come on. All I want to know is how much is cocaine. It's not that hard, is it?
Yeah.
Let's have a look. At the farm, 750. Export to Colombia, $2,000. Import in Miami, 15,000. Wholesale, 1 kilogram in Detroit, 23,000. An ounce in Detroit, 47,000. Retail, 1 gram, 135,000. That's never going to be right.
Let's see.
Anywhere between 500. It says that's the price required to produce a kilogram of cocaine. So the price to produce it could be anywhere between $500 and $1,500. That's to produce a kilogram of cocaine.
Okay, so quite expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure cocaine isn't like a cheap habit to have. I've never taken cocaine, so I have no idea how much it costs you. And I don't know any criminals that I could ask right this second either. Which is unfortunate, seeing as we're recording a podcast. But it would be interesting to know. I mean, I would be very interested to know if you're listening to this and you know these things. Please inbox me on Instagram and let me know roughly how much is it to buy a gram of cocaine in today's money.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If she's doing a gram, she's a gram going through a lot of money.
Though. Yeah, a gram
she's going
a day.
Through a lot of money.
You're going through a lot of money in a week, aren't you? So that just goes to show how much you're going to be dependent on this, because when it starts to get, I mean, if it's like a $5 here and a $10 there, it's not too bad. But if you're talking into like, say, $50 a day, and you're taking a gram a day for a week, this is a very expensive habit. And the other thing is I'm not actually sure how much sex work prices are either. So I don't know what that's going to mean to her. Is that a habit that she can quite comfortably? Can she quite comfortably cover that in a day, or is that something she's going to have to then she's going to get herself into debt for? Is what I was trying to sort of get to. Because we find this a lot, don't we? Particularly with sex work, is that there are people that are that have addictions and they are struggling to pay for those addictions, so they turn to sex work to pay for them. So I'm wondering if this is something that she's able to completely cover with the sex work, or if this is something that she only does the sex work for. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, I would just make. I just want to make note of this.
Mm.
So we're talking about cocaine at this point. So I
Yeah.
mentioned Whispers Pub
Yeah.
just a little bit ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was around 1991. It ended up being busted, and it was found that that Whispers Pub was the center of a huge cocaine ring.
Oh.
So
Okay.
so I mean, these women and we find out all these women are they do have links to each other, and a lot of them would go in and out of this Whispers Pub, as well as some other bars, taverns that were owned by the same people that owned Whispers.
Right.
And so they were all trafficking cocaine and other drugs in and out of these locations. So
Right.
um, so they're around a lot of shady people, to say the least.
Okay. Well, I found something here that says that cocaine prices have fallen steeply since the 80s. It says government
Yeah.
estimates admit cocaine's price fell to about $135 per gram, down from the peak prices of the early 1980s when a pure gram of the drug sold for several $100s.
Mm.
So we're talking about several $100s a day.
Yeah.
That's an
Oh yeah.
expensive habit. Back in the 80s, that's
Very
a very
expensive.
expensive habit.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so and I know that so when I read it and they said that she's injecting cocaine, I'm curious if it's actually cocaine that she's using, or if she's
Or is it
using
heroin?
crack
Yeah.
or
Oh,
heroin. Yeah,
crack.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
no, it could be. Yeah.
So crack, of course, is being cut, and it's a lot cheaper. So I wonder if
Yes.
that's what
Yeah.
she was using instead of just using pure cocaine.
It's not.
So I don't know.
Realistically, is it going to be pure cocaine that she's
Oh,
taking? It's not, is
mm,
it? It's going to be cut. I mean, how often do they
yeah,
sell
right,
pure cocaine? They can make a lot more money
right.
by
That's
cutting
true.
it with other stuff. So I doubt it's
Yeah,
going to
that's
be
true.
pure. So you're probably right. It's probably crack, or
Yeah.
it's already cut with other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Listen
very
to us,
true.
Pablo Escobar, across our podcast. Blimey. We're not drug experts, as you can tell, people
No,
listening.
I'm
Not at
absolutely
all.
not.
I have
No.
no idea.
Yeah. Now, Sandy would frequent the area between Hathaway and Nauset Streets in New Bedford. And she would also go to spots in Weld Square, often looking for customers. Now, when Sandy didn't make it back to that apartment that night, Craig would begin to worry. He would call the neighbor's apartment and learn that Sandy never made it there.
Oh, no.
Now, we've talked about Weld Square a little bit here, so let me just kind of talk about that. So, Weld Square is a neighborhood in the middle of New Bedford, where Weld Avenue connects to a off ramp from I-95. In 1988, the neighborhood was filled with seedy apartments, rundown and abandoned businesses, vacant lots, and dark alleys. This was an area where drug dealers and prostitutes made their living. Its proximity to the interstate made it a popular destination for men seeking sex. Prostitutes, many of them with heavy drug addictions, would congregate during the evening hours at the intersection of the Weld Square neighborhood.
Hmm.
Drivers would make dates with one of the numerous women strolling the streets, and they would drive to some nearby secluded location. So this was an area where it's not like an area where you'd pick up a prostitute and then there you would go to a home or a motel. It was really they drive up, they make a deal, and then they drive to somewhere secluded to have sex.
Oh, they sort the deal out first.
Yeah, usually I would think so. By mid-September 1988, Detective Dexter Doe began to suspect that an active serial killer was hunting the streets of New Bedford. He was now working on a list of 4 women with similar backgrounds and characteristics who had gone missing since May 1988, and convinced that there were more. 28-year Robin Bobby Lynn Rhodes was a mother of a 7-year-old. Like the other women, Robin was a known drug user. It would frequent the same taverns as Nancy Pavia.
Oh, okay.
Now, at one point, she worked at the same fish processing plant that employed Donald and Mary Rose Santos. So Mary Rose went
Yeah.
missing back on July 15th. Okay. While she was drug dependent, there was no evidence that she ever was involved in prostitution. Now, she was last seen by her mother in April 1988, and she was reported as missing on July 28th, 1988.
So these are all
Deborah
slowly
Lynn,
starting to come together, aren't they? They're all
they
slowly
are.
starting to link up, all these different
They
people.
are. And
Interesting. Yeah.
it, it absolutely does. Deborah Lynn McConnell was 25 and a mother of a 9-year-old daughter. She was last seen by her father, James, at a Rhode Island cemetery on May 3rd, 1988, when they buried her mother. Deborah struggled with drug addiction and was well known amongst the people who frequented Weld Square. Deborah was friends with Nancy Pavia, and the two had previously worked together at the Town Tavern in New Bedford.
Ah.
Once again, the Town Tavern was owned by the same people that owned
Yeah.
Whispers Pub. Okay.
Ah.
Detectives would also learn that Deborah was friendly with Robin Rhodes. So now she's connected to three
Three.
of these
Yeah.
missing women. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when Deborah failed to show up for her daughter's 10th birthday, her father James began to worry, but knew Deborah would often disappear for long periods of time. He would never report Deborah as missing to police.
Okay.
On September 4th, 1988, 25-year-old Dawn Mendez left her Bluefield Street apartment wearing a white dress and white gloves. She had planned on walking across town to attend a christening party with her family and to see her 5-year-old son. Dawn had an extensive police record stemming from drug and prostitution charges. Her addiction to drugs was so severe that Dawn lost custody to her son, who was being raised by Dawn's mother, Charlotte. When the christening party ended, Dawn had still not made it. Charlotte would report her daughter as missing soon thereafter. Now, police believe that she was also friends with Deborah McConnell.
Ah, another one.
Yes, they all know each other.
That's freaky.
Now, it is very freaky. Very freaky.
But do you know what this immediately makes me think? All these people are kind of linked, but are all these people involved in sex work?
All except for one. They're all involved in drugs.
So they're all they've all got a common denominator, something that links all of them
Yes.
together. So then this must be
Yes.
somebody who is also involved in this world, because that's the one thing that links them all together.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah. So prostitution and drugs, they're all linked.
Yeah.
Right? They're all linked together. And knowing that they all know each other and they're all friendly with each other and they've worked together, the chances are that I would think that they're probably getting their drugs from the same people.
I agree.
So
100%, because there's got to be a reason that all of these people, there's got to be this one thing that pins these all together. And if we're looking at the drugs, then is that a supplier, a dealer that is holding them all together? Is it a regular customer? Because are they just taking drugs, or are they also dealing drugs to other people? So if they're
in
like
order to make more money, yeah.
And so how is that the case? And it could be somebody who's a customer of theirs, or somebody who's one of them.
It's very good,
God,
because if
this is such a huge perpetrator pool, isn't it? There's so many possibilities as to who this could be.
So my thought is this was just someone completely random. This is just a random John who is picking up prostitutes and killing them.
Yeah.
The chances of them picking up, prostitutes who are all known to one another, who are all friendly, who are all living together, who are working together, it's very slim.
Yeah.
So to me, this is someone that is known to all these women.
Yeah.
Either through being friends with them or selling them drugs or buying drugs from them.
From them, yeah.
So this isn't some to
It's
me
not a
this isn't a
coincidence.
stranger.
No, this is not a
It's not.
coincidence. This is not a guy that's just driving through the area that manages to pick all these different women and coincidentally they're all known to each other. I don't think that's very
Right.
plausible at all. This is somebody that can identify weak links in a chain and is slowly picking one
Mhm.
off at a time. And as awful as that is to use
Exactly.
that analogy, it kind of is because a murderer is not going to go after somebody who's going to put up a good fight. They're not going to go after somebody who's going to be able to fight back, get away, and then identify him. So he's going to go for people that have got maybe drug issues, drink issues, vulnerable, put themselves into a vulnerable situation. So it's easy for him
Mhm.
to do that. I mean, I'm saying him because it could be a woman, but the chances are of it being a woman and is going to be slim. Drugs is
Right.
very often drug suppliers are men. Very often
Mhm.
people that use prostitutes are men. So,
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying him. So of course I could be wrong.
Now, now the one thing I found interesting with the women that they have found so far, and I do say found so far because there are more,
Yeah.
is detectives have indicated that at least some of the women had been posed in in sexual positions.
More
But
than one
what I
of
found,
them then. You said
yeah,
women. So
yes,
more than one of them has been
yes,
posed.
yes, in like sexual positions.
Okay.
But but what I found interesting was that the detectives have indicated that while they've been posed in sexual positions, they believe that either a that this wasn't sexually motivated, or the
Rubbish.
perpetrator or the perpetrator was unable to perform
But that's still
because there was
sexual,
no
isn't it?
sign. It is, but there's no signs of them being like sexually assaulted per se. So it's not like they're finding semen on these women. Now the problem is a lot of these women are the bodies are so decomposed that it would be difficult
Yeah.
to find stuff like that. But there was nothing to indicate that they had been sexually assaulted, which is
But
interesting.
I think that you could still argue that it's sexually motivated. Just because somebody hasn't
Hmm.
been sexually assaulted doesn't mean to say that this person isn't being aroused by carrying this out. This could be sexual to him. It doesn't necessarily mean
Mm,
because he didn't touch them.
right.
I mean, people find videos sexually. They find them sexually arousing. People find photos. I mean, for God's sake, people find feet sexually motive. They find feet sexual. So I
Yeah.
would say that if you're posing a body in a sexually, explicit way, it's either A, revenge on that person because you're humiliating them,
Hmm.
and leaving them in such a way that they are going to be degraded, or B, it's something that gets you off. You don't necessarily have to have the semen right there and then. It doesn't have to get you off to that point, but
Hmm.
it could be something that arouses you. It might not be. It might not be. They build up to these things, don't they? When you go back and look at things like that, they don't. It's not always the very first few that reach the point that they want. They build up to it until it's exactly how they want it. And so it could be that this is I would say sexually. I mean, I'm not an expert, and obviously those police are expert, but personally, just
Hmm.
reading this and listening to it, I would definitely say this is sexually motivated.
Yeah. I mean, uh, their careers in sex work is
Yeah,
sexual,
it's
right? I mean,
sex. Yeah, that's
and
right.
it's sex work. I mean, so there has to be something to that.
Yeah, there's to be a
So
reason.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I just find it interesting that they would say like they believe that it wasn't um, that whoever did this was either not sexually motivated or was sexually motivated, but they weren't able to perform, which
The other
it's just
thing, like you,
interesting.
it's really interesting. The other thing that you said was that obviously the bodies were so severely decomposed that they
Hmm.
couldn't really tell. So
Yes.
again, there is your answer. I mean, you don't have
Hmm.
to rape somebody to be sexually abusing them.
Right.
So this could be that this guy has got, I don't know, a breast fetish, or he's got necrophilia thing, but couldn't bring himself to do it. or something
Mhm.
like that. So he's kind of going for the next best thing in that he's positioning
Yeah.
them how he finds it arousing. I mean, you don't
Right.
know if he's taken photos of them. You just don't know, do you? But just because he hasn't um, physically damaged them by sexually assaulting them doesn't mean to say that they weren't sexually assaulted.
Right.
Because sexual assault comes in
Now,
so many different forms.
I don't know. There's no evidence that would indicate necrophilia, but it's interesting that you mentioned that. So, you remember we talked about the body that was found on July 30th, and it was
Yeah.
found on a narrow path that had been worn, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And they said it looks like this is something that someone would use to, like, you know,
Yeah.
like a cut through.
Yeah.
So that indicate that to me that indicates that this person may have been going back to view the body. Because if it's so worn where you just walk back and you run into the body, if it had been there for as long as they thought it had been, then that path wouldn't
It would have
be.
been overgrown, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It would have grown back up. But that's another thing. That is another thing that happens in cases. You do find that people go back to view the body. In the Melissa Witt case that we talked about,
Hmm.
somebody had gone back and viewed that body over and over again. So
Yeah.
there is a sexual connotation to it, and two, I mean, not necessarily necrophilia, but it could be that he had a necrophilia a thing, but just couldn't bring himself to actually do it. And that's maybe what they're saying, like he couldn't perform. So maybe this is somebody who's got a compulsion, but it's just not at that point yet that they can actually carry out their whole fantasy.
Right. Right.
And I'd be interested to see, I'd like to see in a timeline from the first person right the way through the victims to see if things got more explicit as they went, rather than, because it
Yeah.
could be that he's building up to his pinnacle fantasy, and I wonder if maybe it's something like that where he's tried the first time, the second time something happened, it didn't quite go his way. The next one, so he's done the next one and it's slightly different, but all very similar. So it'd be really interesting to put those crime scenes, side by side, to be able to look at them
Right.
properly and see, has he escalated as he's gone through? Is there a pattern here?
Hmm.
Or is this just that
Hmm.
he's randomly carried out different things on different women,
Yeah, exactly. No, that would be very interesting
Yeah.
because you would think that typically in cases like this, you do see an escalation
Yeah.
in in events, right? Um, so it'd be interesting to see how he how things progressed as he went through. Now, the
Yeah.
thing we got to remember a lot when we get down to it, and I'm actually going to break it down. We'll go over all the victims' disappearance when they're found. It's a very short period of time that all of this is happening too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the dates. We had the first two bodies found in July. We have women going missing in April, May, so far, July,
Yeah.
August. So yeah, so
Is that
it's
every
so
month?
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
things are moving very fast with
Yeah.
this. Now, Detective Dexter, though, now he suspected that all of these women were most likely dead, but without any bodies being found within New Bedford, each case would officially be classified as a missing person, which means that these would fall to the bottom of the department's
Yeah.
investigation pile.
Sadly.
So, very sadly, but luckily, I'm just going to say this detective, he is 100% invested in this, and I think it's fair to say he is the reason um, why this case is um, now they look at this as a serial killer case,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So he didn't give up. Um, he was determined to find the truth and to get people to be as concerned as he was.
Good.
Now, while he was aware of the two bodies that were found in July outside of New Bedford, he was under the belief that they had been out there for months before their discoveries, and he ruled out Nancy Pavea as being one of the victims. Okay.
Interesting. Okay. Why? Do we know why?
Because medical examiners had said that the bodies had been out in the open prior to her disappearance.
Oh, okay.
So Nancy, you remember Nancy Pavea?
She didn't fit the MO then.
She had disappeared on July 7th.
Okay.
And so since they said, oh, this, the first body had been out there since last fall, and the second body had been out there since at least prior to like early spring, then he's like, okay, it can't be her. Now, on the afternoon of November 8th, 1988, a state cleanup crew was working along Reed Road. Once again, this is the second time we mentioned Reed Road.
Yeah.
They're working along Reed Road exit ramp from Interstate 195. Now, in the center strip of the Reed Road cloverleaf, so you guys don't have clover. I don't think you guys have cloverleaf in England. So on off ramps, a cloverleaf is basically where, how do I describe it? It's if you were to look at a on ramp. So you have a street.
Yeah.
You have the street, and then instead of just having like a direct lane onto the freeway or highway, it loops around.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, we do have them here where you drive. If you're on a different road and you need to get to the road, say below, you'd have to go round and down under. So yeah, I know what you mean. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So in the center of one of these cloverleaf, they would come across the skeletal remains of a female. Now, scattered in the woods approximately 20 to 30 feet away, they would discover a London fog jacket, a pair of pants, socks, underwear, and a shirt. So now we're up to, this is the third body that they found. On November 28th, 1988, Massachusetts State Police would begin using a 3-year-old German Shepherd named Josie to search a stretch of Interstate 195 near Reed Road for additional remains. On November 29th, Josie would alert to a spot along the north side of the westbound I-95 on-ramp from Reed Road. Concealed under a tree, they would find the fourth set of skeletal remains found in the previous 5 months. The location of this body was directly across the highway from the remains that were found 3 weeks prior on November 8th. So you have
obviously
one set of remains.
This person's got access to a vehicle and is frequently in this area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, Josie would once again make a hit on December 1st, 1988, this time along the east side of Route 140, just over the Freetown, New Bedford line. This location was about 2 miles south of where the first body was discovered on July 3rd.
Oh my gosh, this is really close. All these bodies are turning up really close to each other.
So all the bodies, and I'll go over here in a moment. I've done map. So they are all within an 8-mile radius of each other.
Shit, that's crazy. Because we know in police procedure they would plot this. So we know that they would plot this, and the chances are that this perpetrator lives within a certain mile radius of this center of these bodies.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So now, beginning in December 1988, this is where the case really starts to escalate. So by this point, police are completely on board with the idea this is a serial killer. I mean,
100%.
100%.
I would say the same thing.
Easily.
Yeah, I agree.
Easily. So in December 6th and 7th, the police were able to identify the first 2 bodies. Okay.
Yeah.
The first one was the body of Nancy Pavea. Yeah, her body was the one that was discovered on July 30th, 1988. Okay. This was the one that she was found by the 2 men on motorcycles who found her in that little strip. Okay. She was the one that the medical examiner said was there prior. Early spring, prior to it warming up.
Okay.
They are way off. First body found, this was the one that was found on July 3rd, was identified the following day, December 7th. Okay. This is the one that was found 30 feet off of Route 140 northbound, just over the Freetown, New Bedford line. This was identified as the body of Deborah Medeiros,
Ah,
who went missing on May 27th,
yeah.
1988. So she was out there for just a little over a month.
Yeah.
This is the body where medical examiners had stated that they believe that she had to been put there in October or September, October of
They
the
were
previous year.
so off, way off.
Way off. I don't know. This is so it's strange though, because the way that they describe the condition of the body, I don't know how a body gets to that sort of condition in like just over a month.
Because the body probably hadn't been there that whole time. There was a
Mm,
case, I can't remember which case it was, but there was a case that I listened to, and it was an audio recording that I was listening to about this case, and a body was stored in a outside container for quite a long time, and because of it was some, don't quote me on this, but it was something like it was the container of a paint shop, or it was the container of a business, and in that they had like the pumps, the not air conditioning, but like a pump unit that would pump out the harmful paint gases into this
yes.
thing. And because this, like, it was like a generator store, and because this generator was continuously running and generators are hot, the body was stored in that generator unit outside, and because of that it dried the body out. So when the body was then dumped somewhere, the body had already undergone like almost like a mummification process, because the heat
Mm,
had slowly like cooked the flesh, and it had gone, like, it had
mm,
dried it out. So when the body was then taken and it was disposed of, when the investigators found the body, it was like it had been almost like mummified, like it had been there for such a long time. But actually, I can't. It's really annoying because I can't remember what case it was, but that was the case, is that the body was left in like a unit, and then when that person took that body out and disposed of it, it had become it had like undergone like a mummification process, and so they believed it had been there a
oh,
lot longer than it had, and that
mm,
was very
that,
similar.
that's crazy.
Yeah, but not
That is
unheard of.
crazy. So weird.
So she might have been
So weird.
killed and then stored somewhere before she was then discarded.
That's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah, very.
And that would explain like how well two bodies and they're both really just
Yep.
so decomposed.
Yep.
Interesting. Interesting. Now on December 10th, and I believe this is the sixth body, was
Okay.
discovered in a gravel pit off of Reed Road in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Now this was roughly about 2 miles from Interstate 195,
Okay.
but still so just a little
Really
bit down the
close.
so
Yeah.
really close down the road down Reed Road. So it was discovered by hunters riding some ATVs. She was partially clothed, and her body, or she was positively identified again in December 1988 as being Rochelle Clifford Doparella. Okay.
Right.
She was the one. She was the woman who had lived with Frankie and Nancy,
Yeah.
and was last seen with Frankie, and she was a witness in a case against a man who allegedly raped her. So yeah, so she was found December 10th, quickly identified shortly after.
And
All
Frankie's
right.
got an alibi for all.
We'll get to that. Yes,
Okay.
we will get to that. Um, so from there, we have um, now we haven't talked about this victim. So the next victim, the woman we talked about when she was found. This is the woman that was found on November 8th, 1988, along Interstate 195. She was identified also in December 1988. Her name was Deborah DeMello Greenlaw. She was 35 years old. Um, she had walked away from a prison work release program in Rhode Island on June 18th, 1988. She had charges for prostitution and had a history of substance abuse. Her remains were concealed once again by trees, and it was her clothing that were found in the nearby trees. Now, in addition to that, she was also found with some belongings of Nancy Pavea.
this is the sort of case that you need a pen and a bit of paper to sit down
Hmm.
and write who was found with who when, because this is very,
This
very
is
it's intermingled. The victims
it
are
is
all very
so
intermingled. So I think this is the sort
yes.
of one you can't compute this in your head, I think.
No, you
It's
can't.
very
It's so
confusing.
difficult.
Yeah, it's very
So
confusing
difficult.
with multiple victims and all knowing each other. Yeah.
Hmm. So we also had the body that was discovered at the end of November. This was the one that was directly across the highway from
Mm.
where Deborah Greenlaw's body was found.
Yeah.
This one would be identified as Dawn Mendez. She was who went missing on September 4th, 1988, when she was going to the christening party.
Yeah.
Um, she was found November 29th or 28th, 1988, and was identified shortly thereafter. So we have a few left,
Yeah.
unfortunately. um, Maybe it's easier. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to go down and just do a summary of all the women when they
Yeah.
went missing and when they were found and when they were identified. Okay, so we had the first woman. We'll call her victim number one, was Robin Bobby Lynn Rhodes. She had last been seen in April 1988 by her mother. Her remains would be discovered on March 28th, 1989, along Route 140, southbound in Freetown. Okay. So once again, there's been already two bodies that were discovered there before she was found.
Right.
The other bodies were in the northbound lane. She was found in the southbound lane. We mentioned once again Rochelle Clifford Dopierla. She was last seen in April 1988. Her body was discovered on December 10th, 1988. This is the one that was in the grave pit or the gravel yard. And she was identified in December 1988. We had Deborah Lynn McConnell. She was last seen by her father at the cemetery in May 1988. She was the body that was discovered on December 1st along Route 140 northbound in Freetown. Her body would be positively identified in March 1989. We mentioned Deborah Medeiros. She was last seen on May 27th, 1988, after having a fight with her boyfriend. She was discovered on July 3rd, 1988, and she would be identified on December 1988. We mentioned Nancy Pavea. She was victim 5. She was last seen July 7th, 1988, walking out of Whispers Pub. Her remains were discovered on July 30th, 1988, off the eastbound Reed Road exit ramp on Interstate 195. She was identified in December 1988. We mentioned Deborah DeMello Greenlaw. She was last seen on July 11th, 1988. Her remains were discovered on November 8th, 1988, along Interstate 195 and Reed Road. She was last, like I said, she was last seen July 11th, and she would be identified in December 88. We have Mary Rose Santos. Okay, she was the woman who was dropped off by her husband Donald at um, at the Quarter Deck Lounge on July 15th, 1988. Her remains would be discovered on March 31st, 1989, along Route 88 in Westport. Okay.
Right.
Her remains. So she was found much later than anyone else. And also, if you notice, it's also a different location too than from these other ones. Everyone else so far has been found on or near Interstate 195 or Route 140. She was found on Route 88. Her remains would be identified in April 1989. What's interesting is how her body was found. So on March 16th, 1989, a letter would reach District Attorney Ronald Pena, telling him that investigators might find a body along Route 88. And if the body was found, the author said he might come forward. Now, shortly after that, we're talking just weeks after that, two boys would find her body, and the informant would allegedly contact authorities. Okay.
Yeah.
So how that's crazy to me.
That's
Like,
somebody who's getting frustrated that the police aren't any closer to finding him. He's
yes.
contacting the police and saying, "You'll find another body here," because he's frustrated no one's found it. And so that he's not getting
Yeah.
any notoriety, because obviously this is being documented each time he's doing this. I would
Hmm.
imagine each body is being documented in the press. And at this point, he's frustrated that they haven't found that body. So rather than just leaving it, he is then making contact to then say, "Look, you've missed one. Look how clever I am. You know, you
Yeah.
can't find me. I might come forward there again. I might not." It's a power, like a power struggle. And
Hmm.
he's trying to keep the upper hand. He's frustrated that the police aren't doing what he wants them to do. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting. I think it's quite clearly all these bodies haven't been put in the same place by multiple people. So I think it's quite clear that we're talking about the same person having carried out most of these, maybe not all of them, but most of these attacks.
Yeah. I think they're all. I think he so far, like, there's nothing that would indicate that it's different people, just because their connections are so tight with between everyone.
I agree. Yeah, totally.
Now, victim 8 was Sandy Botello. Like we said before, she was last seen in New Bedford in August 1988 after leaving her apartment. Her body was discovered on April 24th, 1989, along Interstate 195 in Marion, once again by a highway work crew.
Right.
Her remains would be positively identified in April 1989. Victim 9 was Dawn Mendez. She was the woman who was last seen on September 4th, 1988, walking to the family christening party. She was discovered on November 29th, 1988, once again along Interstate 195 and the westbound ramp to Reed Road. So there's 9 known victims. There are 2 other potential or presumed victims um, who went missing but were never found. Okay. One was Christine Montero. She was 19 years old, and she was last seen in New
19.
Bedford.
Wow.
She was last seen in New Bedford in May 1988, wearing a
Mm.
shirt, blue jeans, and sneakers. She was known to have substance abuse issues. She has never been located, and no remains of her have been found. Now, she was a stepdaughter of a deceased Dartmouth police officer. Um, the other very interesting thing about Christine Montero is she was a next door neighbor to Sandy Botello.
Seriously, this is so crazy.
Yes. Yep. The last one, so presumed victim number 11, is Marilyn Roberts. She was 34 years old. She was last seen in New Bedford in June 1988. Once again, she was known to have substance abuse issues. Um, Her family thought that she had moved to the West Coast in order to live with a relative, uh, but that didn't happen. Now, after all the bodies started becoming discovered and they were being identified, police would actually report her as missing. So this was in December '88 when they would finally report her as missing. She's never been located, and and any remains are still missing. She was the daughter of a retired New Bedford police officer. So the last 2 are missing who have connections to police. Christine Montero, once again, it's crazy that she's next door neighbors to another victim.
So 2 of the victims are connected with police.
Two of the victims, yes.
Has anybody looked into whether the others have got any police or
Um,
authority
I
connections?
I don't believe so. I haven't found anything that indicates that they would have any sort of connection.
Mm, interesting. Okay.
So with that, we have probably I would say we have 3 or 4 like really good persons of interest that we can discuss real quick. Okay. The first obviously is Frankie Pina.
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously. That would be the
So
first one.
this whole case started with him reporting his girlfriend missing to the New Bedford police. It's known that he lived with both Nancy and Rochelle previously to their disappearances. He was also the last person to see Rochelle alive on April 27th, 1988. And of course, he was with Nancy before she went missing on July 7th, 1988.
Is he like a pimp to anybody? Is he like a
Um,
I don't like that word, but you know what I mean. Is he
I
like
know.
is he involved in it like that or
I wouldn't be surprised.
okay?
There's nothing that I've read or come across would indicate that per se, but I would not be surprised if he was doing something along those lines. Now, the one thing that kind of goes against him being the perpetrator is that he was incarcerated in July 1988 on unrelated charges. And he was incarcerated when Sandy Botello went missing on August 11th, 1988.
Doesn't mean to say that he's not involved. He may not be the killer, but doesn't mean to say that
Mhm.
he's not feeding these girls to somebody. I'd be
Yes.
interested to see his like his not bank statements because no one's gonna be that stupid, but I would be interested to see his way of life. I'd be very interested to see how he conducts things, what kind of house he lives in, what kind of lifestyle he's got, what kind of business he conducts. I'd be very interested to watch
Mhm.
him and his. I know obviously he was in prison at the point of some of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that he didn't introduce somebody to these girls or to a set of these girls that has then gone on
Mhm.
to go, easy pickings. I can very easily work my way through these women,
Yeah. So there's no evidence supporting that Frankie Pina has been involved in the murders. He the the one and only law enforcement official to interview him was Detective Dexter Joe.
Right.
Um, Now he would be interviewed by a grand jury um, in regards to another one of these suspects,
Yeah.
and he was considered and has always been the most important witness in this case.
Okay.
Now you asked about like his lifestyle.
Mm.
I can tell you that in September 2019, Frankie Pina, who was 68 years old, was arrested during a traffic stop. He was taken into custody after officers located materials believed to be cocaine inside his vehicle. He was arrested and charged with possession with intent to distribute Class B, subsequent offense, trafficking a Class B substance, and conspiracy to violate drug laws. Immediately after his arrest, a search warrant was executed at a motel where he had been staying, along with 2 additional search warrants for a home in Eastham. During the searches, a firearm, along with other items, including a scale, a cutting agent, money, and cell phone, were seized. So he never changed.
No, so Frankie's not he's just carried on his merry little way, hasn't he, really?
Yeah, he could be a complete piece of crap, but I mean, there's nothing that indicates that he was
He's a
involved.
murderer, yeah.
The next one is probably someone who I find very interesting, and um, maybe if I had to point to someone right now, it would be this guy.
Okay.
So the second guy that we're going to talk about he's actually an attorney. His name is Kenneth Ponte. All right. So Kenneth Ponte was a local guy who had received a pardon for drug possession arrest
Okay.
prior to becoming a lawyer. All right.
Right.
Now, Ponte was known for his own substance abuse issues, and he had connection to at least 3 of the victims, all of which he represented in court proceedings.
Interesting.
Now, Ponte also had a relationship with Rochelle Doperella for a
He's
very
right
short
in
period
there,
of
isn't
time.
he? So he's right in there.
He
Not
is.
only has he represented them, he's got access to them because they would trust him because he's a
Yes.
lawyer.
So, okay. So Donald Santos, who his wife went missing, he was determined to like get her name out there and try to find out what happened to her.
Yeah.
So he went to like local newspapers and local news stations to try to get her story told. He also went to someone in order to get flyers printed up for her.
Right.
Who do you think he went to?
Don't tell me he went to the lawyer.
He went to the lawyer. He went to Kenneth Ponte to get these flyers printed up and to help put them up.
He went to
So
Kent
yeah,
Dodgy.
so he is connected to Santos as well. On April 3rd, 1998, Ponte was involved in an altercation with a male who. That's not right.
This is so confusing. This is so
It is so
confusing. To listen to. This is so confusing.
It is. I know. It's so fucking confusing. Okay. On April 3rd, 1988, Ponte was involved and produced a firearm during an altercation with a male who Doparella claimed had raped her. So Rochelle had claimed that this Kenneth Ponte had raped her, and so this other guy had confronted him, and they ended up getting in a fight. Okay. Now, in October 10th, 1988, so now we have this. By this time, multiple bodies had been found, and the word on everyone was aware that there was a serial killer out on the loose. So October 10th, 1988, Ponte would close his law office in New Bedford and would move to Port Richey, Florida. Of course, this would raise suspicions with law enforcement, but it was determined that he had talked about moving to Florida for about a year prior. But it is very strange. Like when all this starts coming up, he quickly closes his office and takes off.
Yeah.
On January 18th, 1989, Ponte returned to New Bedford Superior Court after a grand jury indicted him on the gun charge from April 1988. On August 17th, 1990, Ponte was arraigned on one count of murder.
Oh my God.
Involving Rochelle Doparella. So let's go back to Frankie Pina. Frankie Pina, we said, was involved in a grand jury and gave testimony. He testified against Kenneth Ponte. Based partially on the testimony given by Frankie Pina, a grand jury would indict him on the murder of Rochelle.
Okay. Just based on his say so.
Well, we don't know what else. We know part of it is Frankie.
I was going to say, they must have a lot more than just his say so to go on for this.
Mm-hmm. Now, the indictment accused Ponte of beating Rochelle to death on April 27th, 1988. Ponte would enter a not guilty plea and was released on a $500,000 bond.
He was released on it.
The district attorney, yes, yeah. So District Attorney Ronald Pina suggested that Ponte killed Doparella because she was allegedly planning on exposing Ponte's drug activities.
Interesting.
Now, on July 29th, 1991, the DA's office announced the murder charges against Ponte were dismissed due to lack of evidence. Now, there was a theory around this time that it was possible that the murders were connected to the production of snuff films.
Oh, this is so convoluted. It just gets worse and worse.
It does. It's rumored that one or possibly several of the victims were involved in the casting. Now, this theory would be dismissed by investigators since no evidence could support the theory. Now, there were hundreds of videos that were recovered from the home of Kenneth Ponte, but none of these films contained any of the victims,
right? Okay,
or were produced locally. So there was
unlikely. It's just rumor. Then
there was pornography that was found at his home, but none of them. They weren't able to find any of the victims on any of these videos.
Okay, so
Good news though, in May 1997, Ponte was disbarred finally.
Well, I should hope so.
For using,
he should have been disbarred a long time ago.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. He was disbarred for using $12,000 of clients' insurance settlement money for personal use.
Oh, nice.
On May 15th, 2009, law enforcement obtained a search warrant for Ponte's former home at 106 Chestnut Street, which had been taken in foreclosure by the bank. The warrant was for the driveway and for a concrete slab patio. The patio was poured around the time that women began to disappear, and it was rumored that Christine Monterio was buried underneath the patio, but unfortunately no evidence was discovered. In May 2007, Ponte was arrested for shoplifting 4 cans of sardines and a block of cheese from a local grocery store. A month earlier, a affidavit filed by his sister alleged that he had threatened to kill his mother, his sister, and himself over a fight over money. On January 26, 2010, Kenneth Ponte was found dead at his home at 366 Austin Street. The cause of death was ruled as natural causes, although significant drug paraphernalia was discovered along his body.
I mean, it sounded to me like his life just spiraled out of control. It sounded like his addiction has overtaken him and it's just spiraled. I mean, threatened to kill his mum because he needs money. He's been stealing a block of cheese and something else. I mean, that's petty. You know, he's not stealing like stereos or mobile phones or things like that. I mean, he's stealing cheese. And so either he's hungry or he's stealing it to go and sell to make money. So his life just sounds to me like it's just completely unraveled. And he's gone from being I mean, it costs a lot of money to go to law school. You know, it's not a cheap thing to do to go and to become a lawyer. So this guy is putting all this work. I mean, he's obviously an intelligent man because learning law is not easy.
It's not.
It's a huge salary. So this guy has obviously taken, in these cases I've read that a lot of times is that the drugs taken aren't recreational. The drugs that are taken are to help them keep awake for the sheer workload that they deal with. And so then it becomes a necessity. They need it to then, and then it just goes all wrong, doesn't it? It's never a good thing.
But see, even if this guy like faked his way through law school, he still has to pass the bar.
I was about to say that. Right? He's still, even if I mean, how easy is it to fake your way through law school? If not, you've got to have some knowledge and understanding of. You can't stand up in a court and wang your way through it. You can't do it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The last guy I'll really talk about, his name is Anthony DeGrazia, also known as Flatnose. He was 29 years old and was known to frequent the services of prostitutes. In May 1989, he would be charged with 4 counts of rape, 6 counts of assault and battery, and 1 count of assault with intent to rape.
Jeez, he's a nice guy.
These charges were stemmed from attacks on prostitutes during the same time frame.
God.
He was held on a $180,000 bond. At the time, he was not able to reach bail, so he would end up spending the next 13 months in county jail on these allegations. He would end up having 18 court appearances during his 13 months of incarceration in county jail. Now, his attorney would file 18 motions before the court for the production of documents of evidence, including a request for a bail reduction because of the lack of evidence being produced against him by the district attorney's office. Each motion was continually denied by the judge. Finally, so DeGrazia would end up firing his attorney, and he would end up hiring a Boston attorney by the name of Robert A. George. This attorney would end up filing a contempt on the district attorney's office for non-production of evidence, and the judge had no choice but to lower DeGrazia's bail. He would finally be released from jail on June 27th, 1990. Immediately after being released, DeGrazia was rearrested for allegedly uttering threats to the DA, Ronald Pena, for wrongful prosecution and imprisonment. He once again post bond and was released. He would end up being interviewed by the grand jury, but was never charged. On July 27th, 1991, Anthony DeGrazia was found dead inside his ex-girlfriend's home in Freetown. His death was ruled a homicide by Freetown police, who first arrived on scene. However, district attorney's office would later rule his death a suicide. The autopsy report would also rule DeGrazia's death a homicide. Would also rule DeGrazia's death a homicide. Now, authorities are quick to state in a public broadcast that it was a timely thing that DeGrazia took his own life after being made aware that he was now being considered the prime suspect in connection to the New Bedford Highway killings case.
Jeez.
Now, this statement was made against DeGrazia by the state special prosecutor Paul Buckley but would later be retracted by the DA's office. Now, no evidence was ever found linking Anthony DeGrazzi to any of the rapes or assaults that he was charged with, nor has there been any evidence produced by the district attorney's office connecting DeGrazzi to the highway killings.
Wow.
So really, these are probably the three main suspects, I would say, or persons of interest in this case.
Yeah.
There's other ones, but there's not nearly as much evidence. There was a guy named Neil Anderson who caught the eye of investigators, but he would end up being dismissed. He was known to have been involved with assaulting and raping prostitutes from the Weld Square area during the time of the killings. He also lived in a apartment near Weld Square. He was known to police as well. So he would end up being convicted in 1994 for aggravated rape, and he would end up completing his sentence at the Massachusetts Treatment Center in Bridgewater. So this is a thing where these women were at. This is not a great area. So there's going to be loads of men who could be involved.
And purely like the work that they are, they're picking up different clients every day. And so, the people that they're picking up on I wouldn't say of high character, I wouldn't have thought. So you have got a huge suspect pool.
Yes, absolutely. I think the one thing that's really going to hurt investigators with this case and solving this case is that there is really a lack of DNA evidence available.
Yeah.
So the evidence that they still have stored includes things as simple as grass. So they have grass leaves, glass, bones, clothing, hair, and fibers that are all being stored. But unfortunately, most of the bodies had been badly decayed before they were found.
Yeah.
Because they had been battered by the elements.
Yeah.
And they had been subject. Yeah. And then you got to think they were subject to contamination by animals.
Yeah.
So the chance of finding any of the perpetrator's DNA on the victims at this point are very slim.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always possible that especially now with, you don't need a huge sample in order to test. So, I mean, it is possible, but it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. I don't know if this one will ever be solved, but once again, I never thought that the Long Island serial killer case was going to get solved, right?
Well, there is that. That's
here
right.
We are
there
now.
is that too. And let's hope that this is the case. Let's hope that there's one piece of information that they find that links all of these together. And let's hope that whoever the perpetrator is, he isn't already deceased.
This, like you said, this case is very convoluted. It's very confusing.
I would imagine people listening are as confused as I am at the moment. This is one of those ones that you need a pen and paper for. Maybe we need to go back.
Absolutely do.
Maybe we need to go back to the beginning and say, right, get yourself a pen and paper because you're going to need it.
Yes.
You're going to need it for this one.
There's a lot going.
Yeah.
You want me to make this even more crazy?
No, I
more convoluted?
really don't. But you're going to, aren't you?
I will. I mentioned the district attorney, right? His name was Ron Pina.
Yeah.
Okay. He was married. His wife, her name was Sheila Martinez Pina. Sheila Pina. On April 16th, 1988, so during this time frame, she was reportedly abducted, assaulted, and locked in the trunk of her own vehicle for 18 hours in the city of Dishton, Massachusetts. According to her, she was abducted by knife point by an unknown assailant around noon when her vehicle was disabled in a rest area on Route 195.
No.
Yes.
So it wasn't her husband that did it, so we can rule him out.
We can rule out the husband.
Okay.
She reported that the man held a knife to her throat and forced her to drive 20 miles to a secluded area where she claims that she was assaulted and locked in the trunk of her car.
But not killed.
Not killed. Her vehicle was discovered by a resident in the neighborhood who heard banging from inside the trunk and called police. Now, she ended up refusing to describe the attack or elaborate on the extent of her injuries to law enforcement.
Why?
I don't know.
Maybe because the assailant was her husband.
Maybe. Now the key. So when the police arrived, the keys were still in ignition, and which led authorities to think that the assailant must have just walked away from the woods and may have been familiar with the area. All police reports on this incident have been sealed, and no arrests were ever made in the case.
That is very weird. Because if this was the same
Yeah.
person that was murdering all these other women, why didn't he kill her?
Exactly.
You know, why just
it's right.
why just assault her and then lock her in a car, knowing full
Exactly.
well that she could identify him, unless that's what he wanted, unless he's fed up with the police not finding who he is.
But also, if you think about it too, this would have been the very first victim, which was Robin Rhodes.
Yeah.
So she was last seen in April '88. So is it possible that Sheila could have been the first victim, and he hadn't yet
escalated to the murder?
Escalated, or maybe he wanted to, but he couldn't bring himself to it. Maybe. Is it possible that Sheila got lucky because he just wasn't he couldn't talk himself into it?
Possibly.
It's just crazy.
But why did she refuse to talk about her? I don't understand that. Why refuse?
I don't either. I don't know. That's the strangest part of that.
Like why would you refuse to speak about what happened to him? Why would you refuse to describe your assailant? Surely you want him caught.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's very strange to me.
Extremely strange. So just a very strange side note in what is a very confusing and it's crazy too. Like if you think about it, all these disappearances, murders occurred within a 6-month period of time.
Yeah, it's very quick. And then they just stopped.
Then it stopped.
And no more people were hurt or murdered after the attorney died.
No. Mm-mm.
Wow, he's connected to all of them. he's got drug issues, and nothing else happens after he dies. That's very, it's very strange.
It is very strange. It's
I have a headache now. Do you know that?
There are, there are. I think there's reasons why we don't do serial killer cases, and I think one of them is because it's very difficult to go over all the victims, to give them the time needed, the proper time needed, because all these women deserve a voice. They're all victims of a horrible individual.
I feel like this episode should have been like 3 episodes long. I feel like it should have been like a series, like a multi-episode, because I think there's so much information to compute in this. Is that you start to get the victims confused, and you start to get the potential perpetrators confused, and it's very difficult to make an opinion on this one, because there's so much. There's just so many people in this one.
No, absolutely.
Next time, do better, please. Longer, bigger episodes.
This is going to be a 10-part episode.
This is going to need to be at least a 3-parter. So sit back, Cherry, put your feet up, and let's go through this for the next 3 weeks.
You get a month off.
Yeah, I mean, in this particular case, that could quite easily happen.
Yes, absolutely.
We could have done this in multiple episodes. This is just crazy. And so I'm sure that if you're listening, you are feeling like me, and you are very tired after that episode.
I'm tired after that.
You did a great job with the research on that. That's a lot of research to have to do. So let's hope that if in less than 13 years, we'll be able to give you an update of this something coming forward, and us being able to give you an update quicker than the Long Island serial killer update.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for this week's case. Good work, and good job on the research on that one, because I know how much you would have put into that one. I know how much it takes with a 1 victim episode. So when it's a multiple victim episode, I know that it's going to have taken a long time.
Yeah, just think of the amount of information that I've left out because
Yeah.
like you have to
Yeah.
like decide what to talk about, what's important, what's not. I mean, everything's important in this case, but yeah, we don't have time to give you a
No.
long lecture, and so yeah, we do our best. There you
Well,
go.
good job. So, to lighten your mood and give you something to smile about at the end of this episode, we are going to do our normal segment, which we like to call the dumb criminal.
Hey, criminal, use a dummy.
Oh, this criminal is a dummy. Thank you, Captain. So, a dozy burglar was arrested by cops after drinking from a shot glass during a raid and leaving his DNA on the shot glass.
What?
So I think it's Pajewski. So Jimmy Pajewski, he was 19 years old, broke into a home in Hanley in Staffordshire in 2018 while the owner was on holiday. So, okay,
Right.
great idea. You break in while no one's there. That's a good start. He helped himself to perfume, £100 in cash, but also thought, while I'm here, I'll just have a drink. So when the owner returned, she discovered that there was paperwork all across her kitchen floor. Clothes had been thrown everywhere. The house had been ransacked. And the burglar was later arrested for a similar offence. And when the cops discovered that his DNA matched a sample taken from the glass during the Hanley burglary, he was then caught. So he received a 12-month community sentence. And this was more than 2 years on after he had done this raid in Hanley. So he was then he admitted like 3 counts of burglary because he's a teenager.
Yeah.
So he had taken 11 bottles of alcohol, which is mental because that's a lot of bottles of alcohol to have in your house.
A ton.
A purse containing cards and £100 in cash and 9 bottles of perfume, totaling like 700 quid.
Oh.
So it appeared that when they found this shot glass, that he had actually drank from the shot glass some of the alcohol that he'd stolen. But I mean, think about that, right? He's taken 11 bottles of alcohol, right? And 9 bottles of perfume. What has he got? A wheelbarrow to barrow this all out of the house?
Well, and here's the thing.
And he's drinking.
Well, if you're already taking those bottles with you, can you not wait like 5 minutes to take a drink?
Yeah. I mean,
or drink out of the bottle.
The other one, he did a second burglary on December 29th, 2018, and he broke into a house when the owners were at work, right? So in that one, he smashed through the back door, stole mobile phones, laptops, perfume, sportswear, cash, cigarettes, and alcohol. But do you know what he did? Smoked a cigarette in the house and left the butt on the floor.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
This guy is dumb. Like, he's dumb.
That is... Like, he wants to get caught.
He had no previous convictions, though, which I found weird. He had no previous convictions, carried out the burglaries because he said that his family had been struggling financially. And because he was young, they just gave him a community order with a 20-day rehabilitation activity requirement.
Oh,
that's it?
I guarantee you he's going to end up back.
I do not have any sympathy for people who burgle houses. I understand when somebody breaks into a huge company and steals from a huge company like Walmart or something. I get it because they're a huge company. It's not a personal thing. But when you break into somebody's house and you ransack their house, you should have your hands chopped off.
Right.
I'm gonna start a hashtag, make Cherry a lawyer or something, make Cherry's laws. You need to please consult me before you give sentences. I'd be like, you burglar, chop off his hands. You child molester, chop off his extremities.
Ow. They probably deserve it, though.
They do deserve it. Child molesters definitely do. And so with that, I will leave you with the chopping off of extremities for this week's episode. And we'll be back next week with an episode from me, which won't feature any extremities. And for now, you can keep up with us on Instagram or any other communication way you want to. We really don't mind. We're friendly people. We'll quite happily talk to you anywhere, to be fair. So for now, be nice.
And bye.
Au revoir.